Welcome to today's webinar. Some quick technical notes before the event starts. There was some hold music while you were waiting. That music should have stopped when the event started. If you're still hearing music, please refresh your internet browser. Also, to optimize your experience today, please ensure your internet connection is robust and turn off any unnecessary connections to your internet provider if you run into any problems other than an underperforming internet connection. Feel free to reach out to our webinar producer, Kelly, via the question and answer module in the user interface. We are so glad that you have joined us for today's webinar on packaging and the environment titled A Sustainable Future Awaits, How to Achieve with Packaging, sponsored by Sun Chemical. Sun Chemical, a member of the DIC group, is a leading producer of printing inks, coatings, and supplies, pigments, polymers, liquid compounds, solid compounds, and application materials. Today, together with DIC, Sun Chemical has annual sales of more than $7.5 billion and more than 20,000 employees, supporting customers around the world. Sun Chemical is constantly working to promote sustainable solutions. Their approach to sustainability guides the way they develop, manufacture, and distribute products, as well as how Sun Chemical works with their customers and suppliers. Working with industry leaders, Sun Chemical is reducing global CO2 emissions by increasing the use of bio-renewable and recyclable materials, while promoting the value of these activities throughout the supply chain. Sun Chemical's emphasis on sustainability continues to be fundamental to its innovation and product development and is gaining broad support from its customers. Again, a couple of quick reminders before we introduce our expert speaker, Bob O'Boyle. To optimize the viewing experience, please ensure your internet connection is robust and turn off any unnecessary connections to your internet provider. If you run into any problems other than, again, that underperforming internet connection, please reach out to our webinar producer. Kelly is there at the question and answer module in the user interface. And we hope you don't have to do this, if you do need to restart your browser or computer, please be assured that you won't miss out. Today's event is being recorded and will be made available on demand to registered attendees. This event is live, which means that the speaker will be answering audience questions. The Q&A portion of the event is after the presentation, but you can send your question at any time using that aforementioned question and answer module. It is now my great pleasure to introduce today's expert presenter. Bob O'Boyle has 39 plus years in the industry. He has spent his career working in a number of roles with a wide variety of experience in inks and coatings for packaging, with sustainability programs being a particular focus. He has worked in significant roles within Sun Chemical, ranging from research and development to business development and product management, and now key accounts. Bob's specialties include sustainable packaging, flexographic and gravure printing, and energy curable technology. He's also a guru in international business management and packaging and barrier coatings. Welcome, Bob. The mic is all yours.
Thank you. Okay. So we have just on your screen right now, we have an agenda of what we're going to talk about. We're going to go through some trends. We're going to talk about sustainable strategies. And then we'll go through, collaborations and some products and things that are prevalent in the marketplace. So the first thing is sustainable trends. And I guess if any of you have turned on your TV in the last 20 years, you probably have seen ads like these or read on the newspaper, where they show you all the different things from microplastics to plastics getting into the water to loop to all sorts of ways of people trying to find a way to get to a sustainable solution. And today it is no different. Many of these things are prevalent. I'm sure if you were to turn on the TV today. Most of the discussions are around shifting from a linear to a circular economy. So if you look at this graphic is used quite often, where it shows how a sustainability concept from what is typically what was 10 years ago a linear economy, going from basically using the product and then just throwing it away, to a circular economy where we're trying to recycle it or reuse it or put it back in the system so that we constantly don't make waste. And there's also a lot of things that you'll see in brand owners and also in companies. You'll see words like eco-friendly, recyclability in their corporate mission statements. This is something that, again, you didn't see about 10 years ago, but now is very prevalent. And if you were to look up on the internet any company of interest, you likely would see how they bring out these particular things to show how sustainably minded they are. The other image that you see there in the center is the UN Sustainability Development Goals. This is an often used kind of an overall program for how people view sustainability. Most of it, if you're familiar with this graphic, number 13 is where we focus most of the time. As a corporation, we focus on all of them, but as far as products and things, it's mostly for climate change and reducing carbon footprints. So when you talk about reducing carbon footprints, there's a lot of ways to get there. You could use less packaging. You can shift plastic to paper if you're concerned about plastic and microplastics getting into the oceans. You can look at bio-renewable materials. So instead of using materials that are petrochemically based, you're using things that are from plants and natural materials. And compostability is another big issue. If you put the materials back into nature, you get into that circular economy, and also recyclability. If you can take your materials and recycle them easily into something that fits into the waste stream and then goes back into being used as another product or used as something else, all of those things ultimately reduce the carbon footprint. Okay. So one of the other things that you'll see is that many terms are becoming widespread. So sustainability, what does it mean? Everybody seems to have a different definition. The ones that we use is packaging materials that reduce carbon emissions and ocean pollution, eco-efficiency, sustainable materials management for packaging, and that gets involved with your supply chain and how you handle the material flow from coming into your plant to leaving. Bio-renewable is packaging materials that are derived from new carbon. And I'll explain that a little bit later, what new carbon means versus old carbon. And compostable, and these are rapid microorganism breakdown to non-toxic byproducts. It doesn't matter if you can compost, if your product composes, but then nothing will grow in it. So you have to be really careful when you look at compostable products and how they're defined. So one of the other trends that you'll see is that nobody is really an expert at putting all these things together. I mean, Sun Chemical does inks and coatings, but we don't really get involved with paper or other things. So there's a lot of collaboration that goes on between different organizations. Most of the organizations subscribe, as I mentioned earlier, to the UN Sustainability Goals. And you can see there that there's a whole variety of different ways of looking at sustainability and what you can do in your own operations to make sure that you're a sustainable company. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of collaboration. So Sun Chemical belongs to a lot of organizations, and so do many other ink companies. You have CFlex, which is a sustainability leader in Europe. You have the Food Service Packaging Institute, which basically takes care of anything food service like, McDonald's or Wendy's or any of that typical paper-based products that you use there. The Sustainable Packaging Coalition, that's a big one that comes out with all the sustainable edicts, and I don't want to say edicts, but recommendations on what you should be using. And the Association of Plastic Recyclers becoming very important in how we recycle plastics, labels, and other types of flexible packaging. So just to kind of summarize it, packaging is a critical component of the sustainable efforts and measurements for global brand owners. While you can address many of your other issues from your supply chain and whether you use children labor and all these other issues that are part of the UN sustainability concepts, packaging is one of the things that is very evident to the consumer and is always prevalent in their mind whether the product is sustainable or not. And then, of course, any kind of renewable resource recycling and a raw material utilization is a key element of sustainable initiatives. Any one of those can really mess up your nice sustainable package if it's not done correctly. So you need to partner with sustainable suppliers. And how do you know a sustainable supplier is doing their job and becoming friendly to the environment? Well, if you look at if you look at them as a company, there's a few key things that you can see that they'll probably do. They'll have sustainability as part of their mission statement. And usually they'll have a chart or something that shows how they reduce energy usage, CO2 emissions, and water. There usually is a program to decrease waste production. They have employee safety restraints. They have full supply compliance, and I'll explain a little bit that in another slide. Reducing the level of substances of concern well below compliance levels. So if you have, if you're worried about, say, BPA being in your packaging, there's a level that's prescribed by governments and whatever, but in reality, that's not a good material, and you'd like to get rid of it as much as possible. So a lot of these companies will have programs to reduce it below just being compliant. And then everybody usually has a third-party validation. So if you go down and you see something like this, here's the one that Sun Chemical used. We use EcoVadis. We let them see all our data. They've audited us and checked us out, and then they rank us in order of performance. So in this case, Sun Chemical received a silver rating and is in the upper 67th percentile for its industry sector. So all these things are items that you should be looking for when you decide to partner with a sustainable company to get your package where it should be. So as I mentioned before, we're talking about sustainable partners driving compliance through the supply chain. You know, it doesn't help if you're getting a raw material from someplace that is mining it or developing it or producing it under unsustainable circumstances. You're not helping the planet really if you go and you buy all your stuff from somebody who's not being very sustainable. So it has to be a whole supply chain endeavor. You have to look at where you get the raw materials, where the inks are being manufactured. Is your converter being sustainable, and are they using the right principles in going forward? And of course, yourselves as brand owners, what you do as a company to make sure that after everything is done, that it's promoted and efficient and is working correctly. So we're going to talk about some sustainable topics and technology. Here's, for me, the fun part. You get to talk about all the different chemistries that are available and what's currently being done in the marketplace today. So in the technology scope for sustainability initiatives, we use bio-renewable materials quite a bit. We try to reduce the environmental impact of our products. We increase package recyclability, and we plan for end of life. So it's not like in the old days when you developed a product and you didn't really plan for what was going to happen at the end. You just threw it in the garbage. But now as you go through a design of how you're going to do a sustainable product, you have to decide how you're going to get rid of it at the end. Is it going to be recyclable? Is it going to be compostable? What's going to happen to it? And if you look at your plan that way, it makes it easier to develop a sustainable solution with the end in mind. So we're going to talk about sustainable raw materials, and we'll give you a hint as to where most of these things are coming from. So using carbon dating we use carbon dating to determine the bio-based content of products. If you're familiar with carbon dating, basically it's carbon-14. They measure how much carbon-14 is left in a product, an organic product, and that lets you know how much is new carbon versus old carbon. So what's old carbon? Well, old carbon is petrochemically based. So it's been in the ground for millennia, and that usually shows up as very old carbon. However, if you just made something recently from a plant that was growing not too long ago, that's new carbon. And by looking at the difference, you can tell whether or not you're being efficient when it comes to using new carbon and reducing your carbon footprint. So carbon dating, it's used, there's an ASTM method, 6866. That's the method most people use. There's lots of labs that do it. And inks and coatings can be tremendously diverse materials. So rather than taking each individual component, it's a lot easier to just take a mixture of all materials, test it out, and then you can determine how much new carbon you have in the whole formula. And then it's easy to report, and it can be reported, and you can use that when you talk to your consumers and customers about how much new carbon that you have. So where did you get all this stuff from? Well, bio-renewable materials can be rosins, basically things from a tree, starches, vegetable byproducts, natural resins, like shellac and some other things, waxes, beeswax and other things. So all these materials can be used in solvent-based things, water-based things, and in vegetable oil-based things, which are lithographic inks. In the old days, none of these materials most of these things were waste. But now we've been able to convert them and start using them. One of the things you do need to be careful of, though, especially when you start using starches and vegetable byproducts and things like that, is to make sure they're not in the food. They're not required for people in the food stream, right? You don't want to take food out of somebody's mouth to make a natural-based product. So we're always using products that are not food-related. They're waste for other reasons, and they can be used to make resins. So one of the things that we can also do besides just using biorenewable materials is to reduce the impact of packaging in general. So there's a number of options. You could use barrier coatings and adhesives to extend the shelf life and reduce packaging weight. You can use extended color gamut printing. We'll explain that a little bit later as to how that makes a difference. UV and LED curing inks to use lower energy usage, and electron beam curing inks. All of these things can be used to reduce the impact of packaging. Maybe you can't use 100% of a biorenewable material, but you can certainly help by removing some materials from your package that are not friendly to the environment. So let's examine some of those. So let's look at lamination replacements. Laminations, okay, so let's look at lamination. Keeps advancing here on me. Okay, so looking at lamination replacements, laminations are difficult to recycle, mostly because they take two materials and they combine them together. And so for a recycler to use them for something, they have to peel them apart, and that's usually not possible in a MRF or when you recycle materials. So you try to find a way that you can use, instead of using a lamination with two different materials sandwiched together with adhesives, you find a different way to do it. And a lot of that is to use monowebs. Unfortunately, usually those laminations were developed for a purpose. In this case, a lot of laminations are developed to improve oxygen barrier. So you'll have a material that's good for aesthetics, and you'll have another material that's good for barrier. And you need to have a happy medium of both. And so what you can do is there's coatings now that you can put a coating on the inside of a film and get the same barrier properties that you would get from the lamination. Now recycling becomes a lot easier because you're only using a monoweb and you don't have a complex lamination that you have to get rid of. Also, lighter weight. If you reduce your laminate, you have lighter weight. What does lighter weight give you? Well, lighter weight means it's easier to transport. There's not as many trucks that have to go down the road, and so forth and so on, and that reduces your carbon footprint, maybe in a secondary way. You can improve recycling of the final package. So if, for instance, if you have a package that's not easily recycled now, I don't know why we keep advancing here, but anyway, barrier adhesive that enables down gauging of the 3-ply structure to a 2-ply structure, that also helps. It helps in lightweighting. Now, it may not give you that mono web material that you're ultimately looking for, but it does increase lightweighting. And now, even today, we have compostable adhesives. So if you have compostable layers that are going into your lamination, you can use a compostable adhesive to help with the whole package and make the whole package compostable. And you have new high abuse coatings. These are coatings that are used for high abuse rubbing and scuffing and things, so that you're not using the lamination to provide a protection for the ink or the graphics. Instead, you're doing that with a film. With a OPV, and that helps when it comes to improving your recyclability. Extended color gamut printing is something that's been around for a while now. Instead of using brand colors and specific colors for each part of your package, all the colors, all the graphics is done with just 7 colors. It's a little complicated to go through right now on this presentation, but basically you have 7 colors. They're the same color all the time. And in the way the plates are developed and the graphics are put together, your brand colors are put together using those 7 colors. It's very efficient. It can operate off of a great gamut range. So oftentimes there's not a problem that you can't match something with using 7-color process. The big advantage is that there's no waste. Theoretically, if you take all your 7 colors, you put them into the press, you print your design, those 7 colors go back to your ink kitchen, back into your converter's ink room, and they're ready for the next job. So in the old days, if you had a key color, if you had a red or something that was a brand color and you didn't need it anymore after the print job was done, you had to throw it away. Well, now you don't have to do that. Now you can use it and put it back into your system and use it for another job. And of course, the whole graphics and colors could change because you're using the same 7 colors. So it's a very efficient way. If you're not looking at the extended color gamut, you really should look at it. It's not that difficult. Some converters are very expert at it, and basically it stops waste and can make a tremendous impact. So UV LED curing units. So you guys are familiar with UV inks or UV coatings. In the days when that used to be a popular option, the lamps would get very hot. There were certain substrates you couldn't use with them. They used a lot of energy. They burned out quickly. All these things are now solved when you switch to LEDs. So they save energy, they reduce heat, they last longer, they provide a more consistent spectral output throughout the lifetime, and they improve the cure on specifically white inks. White inks used to be a problem because they were so dense and regular UV light wasn't able to penetrate very deeply. But now these inks are very prevalent and a good option to use if you're already using UV inks. You basically just have to swap out the lamps and make some changes, and you're able to save a lot of money and be more environmentally friendly when you switch to LEDs. For some of you who are interested in glass, glass is, in days before sustainability became an issue, glass was a problem because everybody likes to have a colored glass, right? You have colored glass for beer, for cosmetic jars, all kinds of things. They make a very pretty display and beautiful colors. The problem is that when you try to get rid of them, they taint the color of the batch. So when you want to get some reused glass to use in another application, it's tinted. And of course, anything that's tinted or looks contaminated is not very, very useful. Also, a lot of these colors used to be done with heavy metals, and that's another no-no in a sustainable environment. You don't want to have a lot of heavy metals in your system. So these coatings eliminate that. Now, recently, there's been some advances in these coatings. They actually help with having very low VOCs. So not too far ago, the coatings that were used for glass coatings had a lot of VOCs to them. So now the new ones look much better. They're much lower VOC. They're much more friendlier. They don't have heavy metals. And when you recycle these glasses, the pigments that are used to color them burn off when you put them through the recycling process. So you end up with a nice clean glass, and you don't have any kind of heavy metals or anything contamination. Okay. So some of the things that you do for planning recycle, you try to make things easy to dispose of. I mentioned barrier coatings before. That was for film. There's also barrier coatings for paper, and we'll talk about those too. There's the overprint lacquers that prevent the staining of PET flakes. So when you're trying to recycle, say, a label, there's different things that you can do so it doesn't affect the recyclability of that label. And then, of course, we're always looking to make things okay for compostability. There's a company in Austria, which we use, that manages compostable certifications and validates the ability for a material to be composted, and they check it 6 ways from Sunday, and it's usually a very good thing to put on your package or to understand that you're being sustainable when it comes to composting. And then, of course, we have recyclable and de-inkable solvent-based inks for PET shrink sleeves, and we'll talk a little bit about those too. So when we look at recycling solutions for labels and shrink sleeves, these are different ways to get the label off the bottle and be recycled so that the PET bottle itself becomes untainted and can be used again for another use where it's required. Remember, the whole thing here is we're trying to eliminate tainting the PET flakes so that they're valuable and that people want to use them for other projects. So recyclable, de-inkable, and solvent-based solutions for PET shrink sleeves. Here's a typical example. If you look in the first part, you'll see that if you take the label and you just throw it in with the bottle and you go through the recycling process, the ink winds up staining the PET flakes. And that's because the inks bleed into the wash water when it gets recycled. So that's a no-no. You don't want that to happen. So what we've done is invented an ink that stays on the label and doesn't come off in the wash water. And you can see that example on the right-hand side, where you have the chopped mix of materials, and then once it goes through the recycling process, the materials are clean, and the waste and everything has dropped out and is being disposed of separately. So anyway, typically these kind of shrink sleeves are done gravure, but we do have flexo options that are coming soon, and they achieve the APR recyclability recognition, and it also passes the EPDP test protocol. So very nice option if you have a lot of labels that you like to that you use in your packaging, and you want to see how efficient way to recycle them. Barrier coatings on paper. Everybody has gone to Starbucks. Everybody has gone to various places, and I bet you've got your hands on a styrofoam cup or a paper cup that maybe is coated with polyethylene. Well, neither one of those are sustainable solutions. The polyethylene doesn't recycle well it's hard to pop off from the paper, and so it winds up being thrown in the trash and not being recycled. So what we've done, and other people have done it as well, is they take a coating that can replace the polyethylene extrusion for the inside of the paper cup. So now the entire cup, assuming you have a nice paper cup, is recyclable and compostable. And you can use that for various options. And paper cups are probably more prevalent than anything else when you think of food service items that you find in landfills and other places. And so a great advance here where you can basically take a paper cup, put a coating in there instead of polyethylene, and be able to use it and be able to recycle it and compostable, have it be compostable. They have obviously, for them to succeed, they have to have good liquid barrier and heat seal strength. And for most people, once you're using these cups, you don't even know that there's a difference. Okay, so a little bit about compostable certification. What does it mean? Many inks and coatings now carry compostable certifications. If you really want to be fair, the best thing to do is ask for a third-party qualifications whenever you look at your package. It eliminates a lot of people from worrying about greenwashing and enables you to basically say that your product is compostable and be confident that it's been tested and done that way. And you base it, but you have to use common sense. The whole package has to be compostable. You can't put a compostable ink on it and then say that the inks are the whole package is compostable. It has to be all the different parts. And to go back to what I said previously, that's where industry collaborations are helpful. The other thing is you have to be careful when you go through these, especially if you're looking at compostable materials. Make sure that once they've been composted, that materials can grow in them again. Sometimes you get small materials of biocides or things like that may inhibit the growth of plants. So when you're dealing with a compostable material, make sure you get it tested. Make sure all the T's are crossed and that you've looked at everything, and so that you're really contributing to the earth in a good way by having your package be fully compostable. So a little bit about roadmaps for the future. What do you expect to see in the future from a lot of companies? Reducing a carbon footprint is something that's going to be, you're always going to hear about. It's going to be prevalent in the news. You increase the bio-renewable content to about 90% or higher. Right now, we're about 80%. So everybody's trying to get that last bit of material out of there to get up into the 90% range. One of the reasons that we're that going from 90 to 100% is going to be a little difficult is because pigments currently are petrochemically based. There are some options that we're looking at. For instance, there's blues that can be made from spirulina. But they're limited range of colors. They don't have the intensity of the colors today. And so a lot of R&D work is going into coming up with pigments that are sustainable. So you'll see that in a lot of programs in the future. And talking about that's reducing carbon footprint, end of life, state and national regulations to mandate easy to recycle packaging. So at some point in time, it's not going to be volunteer anymore. There are going to be mandates for the packaging to be of a certain type and certain design so that the MRFs can handle them and that they'll be recycled easily. There's going to be different options available as well. So you'll see different ways of recycling versus the standard way that's done today. If you'll ever look at the recycling in the United States, it's tremendously diverse. So you're going to see some codification and standardization in the future, and use of post-consumer packaging to produce inks and coatings. We can make coatings once we have the raw materials that come back from recycling operations. We can usually recycle that and put it into an ink and a coating, and that would be a full implementation of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation Circular Economy. So look for waste materials to be bought and purchased by coatings people and ink people to manufacture back into virgin type inks. And then in the composting area, you'll see coatings to replace or augment packaging. We talked about the paper cup before. You'll see more and more of that. You'll see coatings on the inside of many food service items. Anything made from paper will likely have something other than polyethylene or PVDC as a barrier coating, so that there's ways where that would be easily recycled and you wouldn't have to worry about the environment reacting to a bad chemical that got into it. And also, this is fairly new, is adhesives that have compostable options. So currently there's a few of those adhesives on the marketplace today. And if you're interested in those, I would reach out to your ink supplier and ask, or adhesive supplier, and ask what they have. That makes some of the laminates not as bad as some of the ones that are currently out there, especially if you use compostable substrates. And then you can use a compostable adhesive, and lo and behold, you'll have a compostable package. So trends, insights, solutions to transform. One of the nice things about being in this industry is that once you look at the trends and you get some insights as to how people would like to use the package and understand what the end use requirements are, you can generally put together a lot of renewable products. I don't want to say they're easy to put together, but they're easy to implement once you get them ready. A lot of them can make quick impacts, that you can rethink common problems. So if a problem is something that traditionally has been done one way, with some new raw materials, it can be done another way, and a lot of times it becomes much more sustainable. And of course, once you develop sustainable programs in your companies, it becomes a natural thing to do. Today, in our R&D lab, I can't think of any product that does not have a sustainable value proposition built in. It's kind of the way we think now, and makes all the sustainable products easier to develop when everybody is on the same train, thinking of how to change the sustainable properties and make it good for end of use. So right now, that kind of ends our presentation. We talked about recyclable issues, renewables. Hopefully, you can look at this slide when you develop some questions, and I hope we get some good ones.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bob. And I'm just going to introduce our webinar producer, Kelly, again. I am having some interface problems right now, and so this is a live event, so sometimes technical problems happen. So he might be jumping in to help us advance some slides and so on and so forth, because I don't have visibility into that right now. But we have reached the interactive portion of the event, and so we're going to start off with the poll question. So Kelly, can you push the poll question forward because my interface isn't working correctly? And the audience now should be able to see a poll question. We'll give you a moment to read the question and respond. The poll results will be announced at the end. Okay, so Kelly's telling me that the slide is showing. So we can now go to the Q&A portion of the event. So remember, you can send Bob your questions via the question and answer module in the events user interface. Our first question, Bob, is how much CO2 can you save by switching to a renewable ink?
So if you're using the most renewable ink prior to these new developments was water-based inks, right? It's pretty obvious, you use water instead of petrochemicals. So if you switch from a regular water-based ink to a bio-renewable water-based ink, for every kilo of ink that you use in the new renewable system, you'll save about 1.1 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalents.
Great. Okay, and we have some more questions coming in. So I'm going to try to push this to the slide area. So Kelly, if it doesn't work, it's going to be the question from Francis. So Francis asks, when I run LCAs, going from plastic to paper increases carbon emissions. Are you seeing cases where this is different?
Certain times. So when you go from plastic to paper and you see life cycle assessments that are going in the wrong direction, and what you want to take a look at what materials are being used in the entire process, and you may find that there's some in there that's throwing your analysis off, and that you wind up getting a higher result than you wanted to. Especially when it comes to intermediates like coatings or inks or maybe adhesives or other things that are used in the paper that you can't count as something that's being sustainable. So everything is different. I can't promise you that going from plastic to paper will always work, but take a look at those intermediate steps and see if there's something in there you can address to bring it down, to bring it back to where paper is. If you ever need any advice, you can always call us and we can help.
Wonderful, Bob. And our next question is from Ivan. And Ivan is actually asking for some advice in regards to going to paper. Do you know of any paper cup producer who has successfully, created a barrier coating replacing PE?
Yes. yes, we do. Normally, these paper cup producers, we know that definitely there's one in Europe that's producing actively. Right now, we know that because we're the supplier of the material. But normally, these paper cup people would make their own advertisements or whatever. So, if you'd like to reach out to us privately, we'd go ahead and tell you who they are.
Great. And I don't know if everyone caught the email address for reaching out to Bob privately and the team privately is globalmarketing@sunchemical.com. So our next question is regarding bio-renewable content. So the question is, what do you think is needed to achieve a bio-renewable content of above 90% in an ink? What is missing today?
The pigments. Most pigments in an ink today, most pigments are somewhere around 8 to 14% of the ink. So that's where you're stuck. You can't really go past 86% or so because the pigments are still petrochemically based. So what I mentioned before about things you'll see in the future, that has to be addressed, and that the pigments need to be made out of renewable resources instead of petrochemical materials.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, and we have several questions from Dolby. So why don't we start off with the aqueous coating question? So it's very, of the time. So it's something that's a little different than sustainability in the sense of being eco-friendly, but it's sustainable as far as health. So are there any aqueous coatings that can prevent COVID-19 viruses on packages?
Well, let's just say a lot of research is being done in that area. That's highly confidential, but the easy answer is yes. But I don't believe any are commercial right now.
Okay, it's good to know that things are in development.
They're in development.
And so then we have another question here, and this is regarding Sun, and all the great things that Sun is doing. So this question from our audience member is, how do you see companies like Sun playing a part in helping to build and develop the infrastructure in the U.S. to support recycling and industrial composting?
Well, one of the things that Sun is able to do is we have a lot of coatings and inks that, if they're improperly used or you use the wrong ones, can inhibit recycling, right? Because they're not amenable to whatever the MRF is doing at the same time. So with Sun being involved in a lot of these industry organizations, we get a heads up as to where the MRFs are looking for, what types of processes they're using, and then we develop the inks in combination with that so they don't interfere. So you don't want to have a MRF or a national organization decide that, hey, we're going to use this particular way of recycling, and then you find out that the ink or coating you put on the material is going to hurt that. So that's why those industry collaborations are so important to us, so that we could develop materials that are ready essentially before they go into practice. So that's how we help with the recycling in the MRFs and in the area.
Yeah, you had mentioned so many of those associations and affiliations, and you kind of kick-started our presentation on that. That definitely seems like an important part of the strategy.
Yeah, there's meetings a month or so on those topics. Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. No. You're the expert. We want to hear from you. It's like the audience definitely wants to hear from you first and foremost. They do have more questions about recycling, though. So we have another question from Jenny. And Jenny asks, much flexible packaging is pushing towards monomaterials, and specifically polyethylene, which can be returned to the store to recycle. What impact, and you've already talked about this a little bit already, does ink have on this recycling stream? So she's asking for more details about that comment you made earlier. And are there specific inks that have less impact on the stream?
Yeah, so if you have inks that when they go through the recycling process for polyethylene, we have inks that can do two things. They can not contaminate the wastewater so that the resulting polyethylene is able to be used more easily because it's not colored and it's more clean. If the polyethylene has a compostable component to it, then we have inks that can be married to that so that they don't inhibit any issues. And the other thing too is inks are getting stronger, and we can make them so that they're much thinner, and so that when the ink goes on the package, less ink is being used than had been used in the past. And why is that important? That's because there's a lot of recycling that can handle about 1% or so of contamination. So if you can get your ink strong enough and have all the properties and come under that 1% limit, then it becomes much easier to go into the recycling stream.
Wonderful, Bob. And you obviously have a strong grasp on all of this great technical material. Such a strong grasp that Dolby in our audience is asking for clarification on something. So Dolby asks, what is 7-mono pigmented color?
So normally when you do a color line for an ink system, there's probably 13 or 14 different colors in that, right? That give you a complete palette of colors. And then you mix those, right? And you mix them to get different colors, right? Everybody has mixed blue and yellow to get green, right? So there's all mixtures as well. So you get a tremendous, so when you're putting together a palette of colors for some package or for a range of packages, you might have 20, 30 different colors that might be in there. And one of the problems is that if you have a particular, let's say you use a green, and you take that green to make a leaf on your package, but now there's another green that you would like to use, maybe as a tree or a forest or something, and that's slightly different green. Well, now you have to create another green. So before you know it, you've got 30, 40, 50 colors that are being used in your package, and none of them can be used for something else. They all have to be used just for what you've designed them for. So with 7-color process, early on, I guess maybe 10 years ago, so people found out that if you had 7 colors, just 7, right? You have a yellow, a green, a blue, like that, and then you can overlap them when you print them to get different effects and different colors. So instead of having 30 or 40 different colors, you only need 7, and each one of those 7 can be recycled and reused, used all the time. You don't have to change them. The magic happens in the way the plates are designed, and so that's how you get your brand colors. That's how you get the two different greens, by changing the plate configuration, but you're still using a yellow and a blue ink. So I hope I answered that question.
I think you did a great job. It was not technical enough where I can understand it. So I hopefully, Dolby, if you understood it, and if you need if you have more questions, just again use that Q&A box and let us know. And then Bob is here, and he'll be able to answer all your technical questions. It's one of the benefits of the live event. Okay, so Bob, the questions keep coming in, and our next question is, how is the share? So actually, let's change that a little bit. What is the share percentage of an ink compared to the total flexible package on average?
What is the share of?
Yeah.
How much
would say
is on a flexible package?
Yeah, how much ink is on a flexible package? Like, what percentage of that package is ink versus other materials? Is what I think this person is asking.
So for most of the time, it's 1 to 3% of the total package.
3%. Great.
Yep.
Okay. Now I have a question for some of our marketers here. So we have some, our audience has a lot of marketers and brand managers, and they are probably curious, but they're probably a little intimidated by all of this technical stuff. So, if they want to, well, you get to the statistics of a marketing program. They can get into that, but this is a lot. This is you have a great amount of expertise and technical expertise here that they might want to tap. So, if they have they have a project and they want to say, we want to improve our sustainability numbers. How does somebody who's on the marketing team or brand manager team work with Sun to be able to kickstart that conversation on how to make their packaging more sustainable?
Call us up is the easiest thing. Yeah, I mean, we regularly do this. We all have these conversations all the time in doing the life cycle analysis and trying to figure out ways that we can use an ink or a coating or some way to make the inks more sustainable. One of the easiest things is if they're currently using a water-based ink on paper, a lot of people do, even for a corrugated box, they could just switch to a bio-renewable ink. There's usually no cost penalty, and there's usually no performance issues. So that's a real easy one that if you have anybody out there who's printing on paper and wants to just make a quick hit on their sustainability index, all they need to do is make a swap and swap out regular ink for biorenewable ink, and they've got a good solution right away. Impress their boss if this is a new job for them.
Definitely. Okay, and we have another question coming in. So, wonderful, Steve. So, Mr. Esposito, it's always great to see you. You're so intelligent as it is. But he's asking for some further. He's obviously a design guru, so he's knowledgeable. But he's asking for some further clarification. People really want to know more about the 7 monopigmented. So he wants to know. Can you explain the difference? Is 7 monopigmented just a better version of CMYK process printing? Yeah, so you have these. Okay, so CMYK, right? Cyan, magenta, yellow, and K is a nickname for black. So what they do is they add 3 other colors to that. Okay, they'll add a green, they'll add an orange, and a purple, I believe, or a violet. And with those 7 colors, now they can by them interacting on a printing plate and overlapping in certain ways, they can develop colors that are essentially brand colors, right? So you can change those by just changing the plate. So just take this one scenario. Say like you're printing a red, and you have your plate configuration so that it's red with a little bit of yellow in it, right? Now, in the old days, what we would have done is put a little yellow in the red ink, and you would print that. But now we can't use that red for anything else other than that particular brand color. Well, let's say during the same run, shorter runs now are becoming more and more prevalent.
there's another red that's similar, but you couldn't use the same ink. So what you do is the plate changes slightly, and now the overlap of the red and the yellow are slightly different than they were in the first set of plates, and now you get a different red, and now you can use the same red and yellow that you used on the first plate. So these 7 colors can duplicate a big part of the color gamut, and so that, hardly, I mean, there might be some things outside, that you may not be able to hit, but for most normal, everyday colors that are used in packaging, 7-color process works just fine, and that basically you're not making special inks, and you're using, these 7 standard colors to match everything. It's something that deserves much more than you can do here in 5 minutes. So if anybody is really interested in 7-color process, we could put together a separate presentation for that. Hello?
Wonderful. And our next question is from Derek.
Oh,
and so, Derek is asking. Derek is asking about certification. So, if you're using like a bio-renewable water-based sun ink and that has an compostable certification in Europe, can you reference the compostable certification for the ink that in North America, and how is the industry moving forward? You talked about all those partnerships, so that customers can be sure to acquire certified inks and coatings on a global level.
Yeah. So, except for the United States, which are North America, a lot of the European standards are becoming more and more used as universal standards. Europe has always been on the forefront of some of these regulations and everything because of their situation and political environment. So a lot of people are adopting the materials, the tests and everything that are done in Europe, and they've pretty much become universal. So if you want to use it in the United States, you can. You can be very confident that it's compostable. And until they come up with some national program or something, I would say you're free to use those types of certifications when you talk about your products.
Right.
And be fairly confident. Yeah.
Wonderful. And it's good to know because, being able to have that marketing message correct is so important when you're communicating your sustainability journey.
Yeah. And
seems like the hours.
People will put, I'm sorry. A lot of people will put, like, if you make a sustainability claim, there's there'll be there's fine print and everything these days. So there'll be a fine print that'll detail why you said all that you said. And that's what a lot of people do.
Wonderful. Kelly, I understand that the poll results are in. Again, my user interface isn't working. Can you put up the results of the poll? And so the poll question was, where are you in the sustainability journey? And it's great to see that so many folks are really making progress. We're saying that more than half of you are making progress. 58.1% are making progress. And there's definitely those who are earlier in the process. 12.9 are just beginning, and 25.8% goals are set for 2025, and a very small percentage, less than 4%, aren't doing anything yet. For all those folks who are starting off in the process, again, Sun Chemical is really committed to being a partner with everybody in the industry, and we want to thank Bob Avoyle today for bringing his insights. We want to thank Sun Chemical for bringing this informative webinar to the industry. You for your time today, and also being able to sort and be with us as I have some technical difficulties. Sun Chemical and BXP hope you found this webinar informative. As mentioned before, today's event was recorded, and that recording will be made available to registered attendees, so you can continue to learn from today's event when making your future package design decisions. Sun Chemical also encourages you to access their network of industry experts, people like Bob, who are just completely absolute gurus in their field. You can reach their network of industry experts by reaching out, starting by visiting their website, sunchemical.com, or emailing Bob and the team at globalmarketing@sunchemical.com. Thank you all again for your time.